This is Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner. Here today, my co-hosts, Emily Compagno, Kayleigh McEnany. Fox News at Night anchor Shannon Bream is with us, and she's author of the brand new book, The Women of the Bible Speak. And in the virtual center seat today, Leo Terrell, civil rights attorney and Fox News contributor. Great to see everybody today. Yes, well, it's a big week. And legal is what we need and your perspective, so we're glad you're with us again. We got a lot of legal today. Look at this. All right, let's get started. President Biden applauding the jury's conviction of Derek Chauvin, but says it's far from adequate in the fight for racial justice. Let's watch.
Systemic racism is a stain on our nation's soul. The knee on the neck of justice for Black Americans. Today's verdict is a step forward, but it's not enough. We can't stop here. In order to deliver real change and reform, we can and we must do more to reduce the likelihood that tragedies like this will ever happen and occur again.
However, former civil rights activist Bob Woodson went after President Biden's remarks, saying he's ignoring many other Black victims of violence for purely political reasons.
A handful of people like George Floyd are killed at the hands of the police, and because it fits a racial narrative, there's a mobilization. But the most vulnerable people, low-income Blacks in these communities, are the ones who are going to suffer the consequence. And what they're doing to Black America in terms of pushing this false racial narrative, to me, amounts to treasonous behavior against them.
Well, those are some tough words. I want to go to Leo first for his reaction.
Well, Harris, I'll tell you right now, I agree with, in most part, everything what Bob said. Let me be very clear. That dog and pony press conference yesterday by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, every time they say the existence of systemic discrimination, let me say it in response. There is no systemic discrimination in America. Identify the city, identify the town. And it is amazing to me, the narrative, the false narrative is they only react if there is a white officer involved with a Black suspect. Black on Black crime, not important. A Black police officer involved with a Black suspect, not important. You don't see Al Sharpton, you don't see President Biden, you don't see Kamala Harris. It is a narrative to portray that only white and Black crimes exist between a white officer and a Black suspect. That is a lie. It's an absolute lie. And every case,
so
Harris,
why?
It's different on the facts.
Why do we see it?
Pardon? Oh, I'll tell you why. It's very simple.
Why do we see it?
Because the mindset is to keep Blacks thinking that the Democrats is the only party that will resolve this, and the other party, the Republican Party, won't. That lie is the reason why I left the Democratic Party last year when Joe Biden did two things. One, when he said, if you don't vote for me, you ain't Black. How insulting. And two, the Democratic Party abandonment of the police department. I have family in law enforcement. I recognize there are bad police officers, but those are the two reasons. If the Black population voters leave the Democratic Party, there will be no Democratic Party. So they scare them into believing this lie.
So, Kayleigh, let's talk about where they go. Former President Trump did outreach economically through his opportunity zones. The whole market was lifted to the point of like a 50-year mark, breaking records for unemployment among Blacks in this country. But the outreach is where Republicans have really taken some criticism. So what comes in the future? How do you take advantage of what Leo is talking about?
I think President Trump set the model for that, and the proof is in the returns that he got more Black voters, more Hispanic voters than his predecessors. And another big component of this, to hit on what Leo mentioned at first, is President Trump actually cared about crime in the streets. President Trump put together a task force, Operation Legend, to fix the crime in the streets, to protect little children, mostly of color, who have been slaughtered in the case of Legend Taliaferro in their bed, or just last weekend in Chicago, where a little girl was in her father's vehicle in line at McDonald's, got shot to death in that vehicle, 7 years old, and her father, in a heartbreaking call, called his mother and said, "My little baby is dead." And her name is Jaslyn Adams. And we have to know these names and care about these names. And President Trump did. In fact, he sent letters to families who lost their kids to violence in the streets. A little known fact. In fact, I don't believe anyone knows that, but he did because he cared. And that model of care and compassion, it worked, and black voters recognized it. And I think he has set the template for what the Republican Party should do going forward.
So going forward, Shannon, I'm curious as to how the law plays a role in all of this. I mean, you heard Leo and Kayleigh talking about, you know, what we're dealing with now and how we get to those next steps. But the truth of the matter is the black-on-black crime in areas like Chicago is off the charts. Like the violent crime during the pandemic and then layered on top of all of the protesting that turned violent in many of our cities made it worse. And I don't know legally how you get at this.
Well, there are a lot of different things that the federal government can do. It's going to be up to local and state governments, though, to make tough decisions. We saw leaders who would go out and say things like, we are all about supporting the First Amendment. We want people to get out here and speak their piece. And as Americans, that is one of the greatest blessings that we have. But when you have to then balance that against people who will show up night after night, Portland is a great example, trying to burn down a federal building or, essentially that ends up being a threat to federal workers and judges and their staffs who are working inside that building. Local leaders are going to have to get serious about where they draw the line. We're told again and again that the system is systemically racist. So we have to take an objective look at that. But a lot of people thought, OK, getting the verdict yesterday, the former officer, Derek Chauvin, convicted on all 3 counts, does that now give some hope to people who think that there can't be a fair, result within the justice system? So for a lot of people, that was an encouraging result to see the jury do the hard work of working through that and coming to that conclusion. We have to trust our juries to do that. But then to have someone like a Democratic Congresswoman, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, to come out and say, we shouldn't frame this as the system working, that just reopens the wound. And if we want to say, like, hey, is this progress that the judicial system actually worked here? And then we have a Democratic Congresswoman saying, yeah, the guilty verdict on all 3 counts, that doesn't prove the system's working. I don't know where the conversation goes from there.
Yeah. And where is she, the leadership in that conversation? I mean, you look at some of the response, which was peaceful and people, rejoicing in what you're saying. They're seeing justice in their eyes. But it's one case, and every case is so different. Why is AOC weighing in saying that this is not enough? How is that helpful? Emily, your thoughts?
Well, I think to pick up on something that Leo said, which is sort of that saviorist mentality, we're seeing that as it's trickling down. We're discussing Democratic leadership, progressive leadership that are making comments that are pushing for certain ideological concepts to be appreciated. And studies are being conducted now that are showing that that ideology, in addition to social media and university education, that's increasing, it's heightening people's perceptions of racism. And it's the results of these studies are really fascinating. More white Americans than black Americans are pushing for critical race theory, while black Americans are pushing for agency and resilience. Reports of racism, for example, by white Americans are being pushed, in fact, by perceptions of ideology, of social construct. A lot of this is also resulting in anxiety and depression, and it's really interesting when you drill down the effect of these narratives, the effect of these comments by those in power and those in charge that are having on people's perceptions of racism in America, and actually what you do with that. When you ask questions about how the law factors in and where we go from here, so much of that is informed by what people think is happening, and what they think is happening is being totally shaped by these narratives that are being pushed by this saviorist left.
I want to get to this real quickly. Vice President Kamala Harris reacting to the Chauvin verdict. Let's watch this together.
A measure of justice isn't the same as equal justice. This verdict brings us a step closer, and the fact is, we still have work to do. We still must reform the system. America has a long history of systemic racism.
So, Leo, I come to you. I'll ask for your quick reaction to that, but I'll just roll in my follow-up already, and that is the prosecution didn't feel the need to even mention race. Not during the case and not during the closing arguments. All right, your reaction to the vice president and my follow-up.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. First of all, you heard that systemic discrimination, not again. But in the Chauvin case, there was no reference to racism. That was a case of murder, not whether or not Derek Chauvin was a racist. Race was not before the jury. You had a diverse jury. The system worked. The system is colorblind. It does not play the race card. We got the just verdict. As I said yesterday, I'm proud to be a lawyer today because the system worked.